Nan, Steve, Karen. We all set? Okay. Good morning, everybody. I'm Erin Dunne. I direct the research practice for Vertical Systems Group. If I found it a little weird, they had to change the mic for me, so it may take a moment before we work it out. So thank you all for joining us. I want to take the moment just to thank NetEvents, and I had prepared that I was going to thank all of the folks that have contributed so much to this industry, but I guess they're not in the room, most of them today, because it's mostly just press and analysts. But anyway, regardless, thank you very much. And I think what Tam DeLauro was going for yesterday when she said, thank you all so much for enabling all these great jobs, what she was meaning is we can telecommute, we can do virtual, we can be working right now. So, and this is all pretty much due to the revolution in technology that we've had over the past 40 years. So that's my thanks to you all. So first of all, I have to hold things too. This is Ethernet in the cloud. Last night, yesterday, we spent most of the time looking at the present and backwards. Today, we're looking forwards. And so everything we're talking about here is what's happening now in the cloud and what we're hoped to happen moving forward in the cloud and how Ethernet can enable that and how it already is. So I'm going to start with just a quick level set right now, if I can, with kind of the big picture view, which is this is what's happening on the Ethernet services front. Now, you saw some data points yesterday from Tam at DeLauro and IDC talking more the equipment. This is the services, meaning an enterprise customer is paying for a service on a monthly basis to an AT&T, to a Comcast, and this is the kind of dollars that we're seeing there. Almost 50 billion out at 2017. We're seeing all of those, all of the regions throughout the world growing at double digits rates. A couple interesting stats. First of all, this is the fastest growing wireline data service in the world, hands down, nothing's competing with it. Also, since we were looking back yesterday, we'll just do a little bit here, is it's also the only wireline data service that has increased at double-digit rates year over year since divestiture. So it's the longest growing one since divestiture to continue those rates. So kind of interesting here. It's also, as we know, the preferred technology for service providers, for equipment vendors, for enterprise network managers throughout the world. And then here we go. This is what Nan was talking about yesterday. He made a quick talk about this. This is a quick look at the bandwidth. And this pulls in a whole lot of information that we had talked about yesterday and will continue to talk about now. First of all, Ethernet's growing. This is the bandwidth from all of those services connections that were being tossed into the cloud that I just showed you on the previous slide. So you're talking about higher speed bandwidth connections via Ethernet that are being migrated to from the legacy data services. I'm going to look back again. That blue line right there for legacy data includes everything else besides Ethernet that you would ever use on a wireline basis to connect to a service. ATM, frame relay, private lines, SMDS, X25, ISDN, you name it. Broadband, it's all in there. So this is a very significant development for our industry, and it impacts everybody on this panel, because how do we deal with this bandwidth explosion? So lots going on here. I think the interesting thing too, you see that little arrow there, and we made a big deal about this last year, is that crossover point where Ethernet surpassed legacy services as far as bandwidth goes happened and it coincided with the MEF's 10-year anniversary. So another great showing here for the Ethernet market. So with no further ado, that's my quick overview of the market from the services perspective. Anyone has any questions about that, grab me afterwards, happy to talk about them. But you don't need to hear from me, you need to hear from our esteemed panel right here. And I want to do a level set here to understand what we're looking at from the panel here. This is going to be a difficult session, right? Because we have gentlemen and ladies here that are representing all very different aspects of the industry. We have Nan and, wait, where are we? Nan and James that are representing the forum community, even though Karen is on the board for the MEF. She's representing the service provider community. Then we have two gentlemen from Intel and from Aquantia that are representing more the equipment vendor community, chips and controllers. So this is going to be a very interesting concept here. So I want to start with a quick question. Here we go. So we're focusing here on how can Carrier Ethernet deliver on its promise to enable cloud computing. So the very first question here, and I'm going to throw it off to Nan to start, which is, here we go, questions, so I don't have to keep looking up there. What can we do as an industry to accelerate Ethernet in the data centers and in the clouds? So I'd love to hear your take on that.
Great. Good morning, everybody. So I wanted to, that was a great question. We talked about that a lot in terms of how the carrier Ethernet being able to be the service, not only for enterprise solutions, mobile backhauls, but also for data centers and in terms of the service itself. So there's two news MEF is announcing today. Well, actually, industry announcing today. What just happened to be a NetEvent, so just coincide with NetEvent. If you forget everything you have heard so far for the last 2 days, you got to remember this too. Number one, in MEF, in last 12 years, we had 3 committees, which had been there for the beginning almost. Technical committee, marketing committee, and certification committee. Today, we announced first time in 8 years, we formed a new committee, so called Service Operations Committee, which to define, streamline, and standardize processes for buying, selling, as well as operating and delivering MEF-defined services. Is a huge deal because it's showing the maturity of carrier Ethernet, which eventually is already becoming a dominant technology and services. So this is important, and obviously have a significant impact on the industry, not only just for the enterprise buying the services, the mobile backhaul, mobile operator buying Ethernet services to the cell site, but importantly, is related to the cloud services. How do you dynamically provision those services to cloud? The number remember that, okay, that's big news. For us, is huge. And because also MEF has surpassed the services in membership in terms of the service provider. We have more service providers now than the equipment vendors. And that also showing the continued growth of carrier Ethernet services.
Did that just happen this year?
Yeah, it just happened this year.
Nice.
So second thing, so the 214 members, 118 are service providers. And we'll talk more this afternoon. But second news is also revolutionary, okay? It is the fact that the industry coming together created a brand new platform to address the cloud Ethernet. So with that, I'm gonna hand over to my colleague, James Walker, who's gonna announce this big news. James?
Thanks very much, Nan. So this is actually something that's happened very quickly. We started talking as an industry in December last year about some of the challenges that our customers were seeing in deploying large-scale data center environments, connecting those large data centers together. And so over the last 6 months, a group of those companies have come together. And so we're announcing today the formation of a new forum in collaboration with the MEF called the CloudEthernet Forum. This is a very important and critical step. It has many things that it looks to achieve, but all of those are of concrete benefit to end users, end customers who are building large-scale, complex, sophisticated data center environments. A lot of what you heard yesterday was about how Ethernet, one of the great things about it is that it's remained a constant, that it's remained a standard, and it's managed to evolve through all the various things that it's been asked to do over the past 40 years. This is really the continuation of that. Ethernet is a powerful enabler in the data center. It connects together the servers, the virtual servers, everything within the data center environment. And as we look forward to its role in the future, we see a need to refine, in some cases improve or enhance the behavior of Ethernet within a large-scale data center environment. This is complementary to other pieces of work that are being done in the industry today, whether that's at layer 3, where there is work being done to virtualize server environments, or even as we look forward to SDN, where there's a desire to, if you like, have a steady state at the transport layer, which the controllers at the SDN level can then manipulate in a more easier fashion. So we're announcing the launch of this forum. There are, along with me, there are 8 founding companies, so for a total of 9, and we have a couple of extra ones that we're looking to add very shortly. And then there is a large number of companies that have expressed interest, so we'll announce new members as that goes on. But the founding members and board members are Alcatel-Lucent, Avaya, Equinix, HP, Juniper, PCCW, Spirent, Tata Communications, which I represent, and Verizon. So there'll be a briefing session for you this afternoon, which we can go through in more detail what the objectives are of the forum. But in large, there are 3 main areas of focus for the initial piece. 2 focusing around protocol aspects, around VLANs and MAC address explosions within data center environments and between data center environments, and 1 project to rationalize storage technologies within the cloud, particularly over layer 2. So that's the key announcement that we're making here.
Great, thank you. Before we move on, we could take time for maybe 1 question here about the Cloud Ethernet Forum. Remember that you will have briefing opportunities after the session. Does anyone have a quick question about that? 1 question here. Get away from a microphone, they can't hear you on the stream.
Just real quick, is there any part of it is focusing on reducing energy use in data center?
Not yet. So what we wanted to do was start off with 3 sort of major scaling problems that exist within and between data centers. There will undoubtedly be a whole series of other things that the individual members want us to do, and we're obviously a member-led organization. There is a lot of focus on reduction of energy use within data centers. We need to look at how much Ethernet and the infinite Ethernet infrastructure that supports the data center can do to contribute to that reduction.
Thanks for the question. I want to pose the same question, maybe just a little bit different, to the 3 additional members of the panel here, and I'll start down there with Kamal, which is how, this was phrased as how as an industry can we help accelerate Ethernet in data centers and within data centers. But can you answer that specifically from your perspective from the physical layer? And then we'll move to Intel right here and then up to Karen.
Absolutely. So what we need to do as an industry to accelerate the services that the clouds will provide over time is to enhance the infrastructure itself in the data center in terms of the equipment and the connectivity. So it might be a surprise to many of you that 80 to 90% of the connections today in the data centers between servers and switches are still using 1 gigabit Ethernet. It's a perception that 10 gigabit Ethernet is here now and is being widely used in the data centers. So again, 80 to 90% are still actually the good old 1 gigabit Ethernet using RJ45 connections. The 20% or so connections that have moved to 10 gig are actually the early adopters, folks who could afford to do the engineering and have their own IT departments are the ones who have moved to 10 gig. As an industry, what we need to do is to now enable the transition for the rest of the industry to 10 gigabit Ethernet so that the infrastructure is capable of moving to the better services that we're all looking forward to.
All right, thank you. Do you want to go, Steve?
Yeah, so Intel's been in the Ethernet market for, from the very beginning with the DIC spec. And part of the reason we've invested over time is because it's a standards-based technology, broad ecosystem that's driven innovation. And we want to make sure at Intel that the network never becomes a bottleneck for Moore's Law. There was a lot of talk about Moore's Law yesterday, and yes, it's alive and well. We see a line of sight long into the future. Mm-hmm. But when we talk about cloud computing, now the network has become the bottleneck. And when we talk to our major cloud customers, they can deploy servers today in a matter of minutes or seconds. They can move those servers from physical machine to physical machine, from data center to data center. However, when they deploy the network or have to reconfigure the network, the time is measured in days or weeks or multiple weeks. And this is an area that I think as an industry we can help focus on and deliver the virtualization that Glenn talked about. And developing network virtualization is going to allow our carriers to provide networking services much faster, basically at the speed of software, like we can do with servers today.
That's great. So Karen, I bet you'd love to comment on that.
Sure.
Wait, before you start, we should thank Karen here for the lovely Wi-Fi connection and the smoking fast connection that we all have that we're using right now. That would be Comcast.
Yeah, that's
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a carrier Ethernet, by the way.
Yeah, I do want to make sure everyone knows it is Ethernet, and we were able to bring in 100 meg dedicated internet. And from an Ethernet perspective, and that was a pretty tight time frame, so I want to thank all my team in California who actually worked with the Computer History Museum and made that happen. And we're very happy to be part of this event and part of contributing back to the Ethernet industry. So thank you for that comment. When I look at accelerating Ethernet in the data centers, from a service provider perspective, I guess I'd look at it both from my company's view, but also very much from an enterprise business customer. How do we help them take more advantage? So I think on the first point, I would look at the fact that as a service provider, every time I need to build into another data center, there's a lot of variation. Even when I work with a single very large company, it seems like there's regional differences. So I think we could all benefit in terms of speed and efficiencies by having some more commonality. I think we are headed that direction with the new MEF Service Operations Committee, where I think that we can all benefit by really just having more standards-based, but also it's really reaching into how do we operationalize how we work with each other. So I think there'll be a lot of gains for everyone from that. And as a service provider, I think we certainly look forward to simplifying that process. And it really does span everything from every time you need to do a contract, you need to sit down and understand the specific site. How can we make that easier? From a marketing perspective, one of my challenges is we build in there, we need to be able to have multi-tenancy. It's really important that we can bring multiple customers in there on aggregated equipment versus I got lots of single shots and lots of boxes, and data centers don't love that. We don't love that. Certainly always working to improve that. Turning to the enterprise businesses, we in particular at Comcast are really working to enable some of the mid-sized enterprises, not necessarily just the super big guys. And to some degree, they need the education to understand that, especially you think of healthcare, you hear about HIPAA compliance, there's worries about, does connecting to the cloud, historically it's been public internet, and that scares people. And so really giving Ethernet as that alternative and the scale and really helping people understand the reliability you really can get. And today we're largely fiber-based. That's what we're building for Ethernet, and it just unlocks a lot of doors. So really taking that to the enterprise businesses, both mid and large size, so that they can take advantage of the cloud, so they can be closer to it, and they can actually get that performance that they're looking for and that efficiency. Really a lot of drive to have more and more bandwidth for less money, and then to rely on a data center to actually help them access applications, put their own data there. Those are important drivers. And I think the more that we engage the business community and they start to understand, we can do a lot more to simplify it and accelerate that adoption.
That's great, thank you. Does anyone have a question for Karen or anyone else on this panel before we move on? We have a question right here. I just don't want to wait till the very last and have you all forget them.
This is for Karen and concerns your need for multi-tenancy. This is a question of clarification. Are you implying that Comcast will run its fiber plan to the building, to the commercial building, and there'll be multi-tenants in that building that will then use different carrier Ethernet services, or did you have something else in mind?
Well, I think it's a couple of things. One, yes, we are running fiber to the data centers and to the business locations. That's certainly our service offering, is to connect all the sites. I think both in terms of being able to get to the data center and make it as easy as possible for that business to connect to who else they want to in that data center, and understanding that there are other providers in the data center. I guess I do want to point out a unique position for Comcast is that we have a diverse route. We have our own network, and I think, again, that's an environment that promotes that and makes it easy for people to take advantage of that is important.
Great, thank you. So I wanted to just draw a little comparison to, I think, a metaphor or an example that was used yesterday a couple of times, and oddly enough, it was both by ladies, and they were both talking about shoes. And so when a pair of shoes arrives at your door from Amazon, it's like magic to most folks, right? But the folks sitting here on the panel all play in a very unique way in the chain that allows that pair of shoes to magically arrive on your doorstep. And now that more and more of the applications, more and more of our interest as an industry is with the cloud, I'm going to ask each one of those folks, and I'll actually start with Steve. First of all, what keeps you up at night as you play in this industry at the speed of cloud services? Cloud providers, cloud services, the cloud industry moves faster and with more scale than anything I would say we've ever experienced. So I'd like to hear what keeps you up at night. Then I'm going to go down to Kamal.
Yeah, so I think there's a number of things that keeps me up at night. As I mentioned, we're all about driving Moore's Law, driving compute, and we don't want the network to be the bottleneck. So one of the things that we see is the amount of devices, the amount of mobile devices, the data that the carriers have to carry. It is exceeding the pace of which we can develop or deploy equipment. So we have to do it in a much smarter way, and we have to get to a space where we can virtualize these network functions. And so, deploying new services to customers should not take 90 days. We should be able to do it in 90 minutes. Mm-hmm. And that's going to help out carriers to provide services at a faster rate, earn more money by having more personalized services. And so what we're doing at Intel is we're developing platforms that are more optimized for virtualization, whether it's server virtualization or network function virtualization.
Thank you. Kamal, what keeps you up at night? And before you start here, I want anyone else, because I'm going to stop right after this, I want you to be able to tell these folks what should keep them up at night, okay? All right.
So what keeps me up at nights are the smartphones and the tablets. So not in the way you would think.
Move a little closer to the microphone.
So the reason smartphones and tablets are the things that keep me up at night is because I see this paradigm shift where the connectivity, at least at the user level, is moving to Wi-Fi clearly, away from Ethernet. And so now we need to understand what that will do to the Ethernet networks as we understand them. So the reality that we're moving to Wi-Fi will have profound impact on the traditional Ethernet networks, especially in the enterprise LAN environments, the campus networking. We have had a lot of discussion here about the data centers, but we also have to worry about what's going to happen to the enterprise networks. And that's what I have been focusing on, I have been thinking about. And what I see is that the number of RJ45 connections, the good old Ethernet, when we all talk about Ethernet, the first thing that comes to your mind now is basically the RJ45 connection. And it is the case that the number of RJ45 connections will actually go down over time. So the number of Ethernet ports, as we think of them, will go down over time. But at the same time, they will evolve in a different way and still provide more services. And how that will happen is what keeps me awake.
James, do you want to add?
Yeah, so I've got, I suppose, two perspectives on it. One is the president of this forum, but also as a service provider ourselves at Tata Communications. I do genuinely actually feel better off that there is an industry organization and a forum which gives us an environment to solve some of these complex data center connection issues, because as a service provider, what our customers are starting to ask us to do Whereas previously there were really data centers that were connected into the internet, and there was relatively little complexity to how those data centers were connected together. Now there is starting to be a lot of sophistication about how that's getting done. And customers are asking us for, give me this latency or drop the route. Give me this latency for a certain amount of traffic and give me a different latency for a different amount of traffic, and I might want a bigger connection on that path, and I might want it to go on a particular route because I've got regulatory concerns where I can't take private data outside a particular country's borders. All of these sorts of things, this very deterministic behavior, very controlled behavior between data centers is something that's becoming very complicated from a traffic engineering point of view to achieve. So having a forum where as an industry we can get together and discuss all of that is great, but I also have a big burden that I need to place on my internal engineering teams of just how we actually deliver that kind of adjustable, deterministic performance to the back end that supports these data center connections.
Thanks. Erin, you want to go?
Yes, I think I'd go back to Steve's comment about speed. I think what I worry about is how long things take in terms of bringing up a customer. And I think we're pretty happy. We were able to bring up Ethernet here, including actually needing to do construction in less than 30 days, and that's fantastic. But you'd have to know the inside of this business to think that's great. And I think we absolutely are aiming to add more automation, streamline operations, and then how else technically can we make this a faster turn up? And I think when you look at the data centers, it is having more standards, some common agreement about so that we already are built there so that when a new customer wants to come on board, it's very easy for them because we've already got that connectivity and that interface in place of exactly how it's going to add another customer to the site. So I think speed to market, speed to turn up, certainly every day that you're taking, kind of in the process of build and turn up is days you're not billing a customer and you're not bringing in revenue, but it's also days of frustration for the customer because everyone's anxious to get more bandwidth faster so that they can be more productive and not worry about it if you look at it from a business point of view. So I think speed is certainly a big issue, and it just ties to every other factor we've talked here today.
That's great, thanks. Dan, do you want to add?
Hey, just one more thing. I sleep a while at night, so I don't wake up at night. But one thing bothers me though is really the people have talked about it. Speed. One of the key thing, if you look at Ethernet, what worries me is too much of it. Not that I'm complaining. I'm just saying that we need a way to really, like I said earlier, to really streamline the processes. If you see the chart Erin put up there, Ethernet is going to be becoming the most dominant Ethernet services, technology and services for everybody who consume anything in data. So with that in mind, the Service Operation Committee is really on a critical path to deliver that in terms of streamlining the processes, which are eventually going to deliver that dynamic automation so that we can provision that on demand, in terms of potentially minutes or seconds instead of days or months. So that's actually is really key thing. That's why the MEF has started this Service Operations Committee. So with that in mind, what we really want to do is really matching the control planes of TDM, which we don't really like anymore, but the control plane there is example that's what we're trying to match.
Great, thank you. Right, I mean, I think a clarification I wanted to make too that came up in the panel yesterday is, again, talking about some of these, that's right there, some of these legacy services. There's still billions of dollars of frame ATM and private lines out there worldwide. I looked up the number yesterday when the question had come up. Billions of dollars. And frame ATM, I mean, you got a big slide. It's dropping right off the cliff, but private lines are a pretty steady market for that exact reason, that they work. And they provide a bandwidth and a ubiquity that a lot of folks really like, especially if you have smaller networks or really tight network needs. So, I mean, what we hear over and over again, and I'm sure these folks are hearing them too, is they want the best of this newer technology with the best of what they used to love about their ATM networks or whatever that might be. So, we do have just 1 minute left, and I had it up there. I put specifically the Carrier Ethernet 5.0 wish list. I'll tell you why I said 5.0. Number one is Bob mentioned 3.0 at the last MEF meeting when he was speaking, and Nan almost had a stroke, right? So
I'm about to kill Bob.
Right. 4.0 didn't sound right, so I figured I went way out in the future to 5.0. So one word, 5 words, 3 words, whatever you want. What's on your 5.0 wish list? I'll start right down at Kamal. We're going to go straight down the road, and then we're done. No, you're going to defer? Oh. We probably hit all of the concepts, but I just didn't know if there was something we want to put on our wish list.
Yeah, I think for me, scalability of Ethernet,
Right.
retaining that, I think, is really critical. And we've sort of got line of sight to some of the operational things that Nan's talked about and the other guys talked about, speed to market and so on. Scalability, it starts to get back to the plumbing, I guess.
Yep. Anything you want to add, Karen?
I would echo scale, absolutely, and I would say just the flexibility. I think a few people talked about that yesterday of, is Ethernet really keeping up with what's coming next that we don't know about yet, and continuing that path?
Yeah, the scale, the flexibility, but also the automation, and making it easier for customers to deploy networks.
All right, excellent. Okay, so the press has their 3 words, right? Scale, speed, automation.
And beach.
And
I wanted to be on beach by then.
And on the beach. Thank you all. If there's one, I think we have time for one more question. One more? One more question if anybody has it, although we did pepper them through. Anybody? Yes. Wayne has a question.
Yeah, I got a question. Primarily for Kamal. You said that Ethernet ports are going to produce.
Hold on. Wait for the mic, just for the streamers. Wait for the mic.
Sorry about that. I forgot about the microphone. I just yell. You said that Ethernet ports were going to decrease in number. How do you justify that? Because Ethernet is exploding globally. Are you talking about carrier Ethernet ports? Or are you talking about data center Ethernet ports? Or all ports globally?
Yeah, so what I was pointing to is the fact that with the tablets now becoming more common in the enterprise, which is where Ethernet, majority of Ethernet ports come from. Billions of Ethernet ports that we see today are actually predominantly coming from local area networks. So what's happening is with the Wi-Fi, what now the paradigm shift will be that instead of you hooking up a desktop computer with the Ethernet port that's coming out of the jack in the cubicle, what you will now have is either the laptop, which is so thin that it doesn't have the traditional Ethernet port, instead has a Wi-Fi, but then it still needs to talk to an access point, and that access point is what now will have the traditional Ethernet port, in the sense the wired Ethernet port going to the server room. So what you have is now, instead of say 100 million PCs, you have 10 million access points that will use the traditional Ethernet ports. But those 10 million ports are higher speed, better quality Ethernet ports.
But you're also gaining millions and millions of Ethernet ports where there are no Ethernet ports at all now globally, and you're gaining millions more in virtualized data centers and virtualized desktops and other types of networking.
Yes, so what's happening is obviously you have to look at the market segments. In the US, primarily what you have is this movement towards tablets and such. But in the places where you still have the traditional desktops still ramping up, it is true that the number of Ethernet ports will go up. But I think when you look at the scale, what you will find is that we're talking hundreds of millions of ports in the LAN environment relative to a few million ports in the carrier or the data centers or the metro environments.
All right. We good? Yeah. I think you need to take that offline right there, and we'll maybe compare
it
some
might
notes.
be a clarification thing. We can do it.
And I guess I would say I think it's going to go down market more and be more accessible to more people. That there will be a lot of volume, and why scale is going to be so important from a provider perspective.
And it's also the difference between physical ports and virtual ports. So I agree with you that there's lots and lots and lots of VMs that each are generating individual, virtual ports and all that sort of thing. The question is how that drives physical port adoption versus virtual port adoption. Ethernet still needs to scale to do both of those things, either way.
Yeah, so quick clarification. So let's say you had a gigabit pipe and there was only one virtual pipe on it, meaning no pipe on it. When what would happen is you would move to a 10 gig pipe and perhaps have 20 virtual sessions on it. So the number of connections is increasing, but doesn't necessarily translate to physical ports.
All right. Thank you. Thanks to our panel. They will be around for a while if you have any additional questions. Thank you.